And this is my review of Horror of Fang Rock, the first story of the 15th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor. Horror of Fang Rock is the 92nd story overall, it's 4 parts long, and is written by Terence Dicks. This is also the first story to be produced under Graham Williams' tenure as producer, and he was brought in to make Doctor Who more light-hearted and child-friendly, which is ironic because Horror of Fang Rock is a pretty dark story to say the least, and the plot of the Horror of Fang Rock is as follows. A mysterious light in the sky, and a natural glow in the ocean in a thick fog brings terror to the lighthouse keepers of Fang Rock. When the Doctor and Lilo arrive, the first death has already cast doubt on the safety of the lighthouse, but the Doctor discovers something more terrifying evil than he could ever imagined. So that is the plot of Horror of Fang Rock. Horror of Fang Rock is a story that many fans consider a classic. I can see why, but at the same time, I do think it's a tad overrated. I do feel it could have been written a lot better. The production was decent though, and I like nothing too special. The lighthouse interior was alright. Dodgy blue screen aside, but I think it's because this is the first and only Doctor Who story, classic Who story to be filmed entirely outside the BBC television centre in London, as it was actually filmed in Pebble Mill Studios in Birmingham. The special effects were good, especially what was used to represent the root in its non-humanoid form. The script was very good, and I think the direction by Paddy Russell was great as well. Well, I think this is definitely one of her better directions, but not as good as Pyramids of Mars in my opinion. I do like the plot of the story, and I think I liked how it was a slight homage to the base under siege era that the Patrick Charlton era popularized, as well as adding another chapter to the Rutan Sontaran War element, even though it's just a brief mention, and this is the only time we actually see the Rutans on screen. I really liked the tension the horror framework displayed. It felt scary, but not as scary as other Hinchcliffe era stories, and I do think that Terrence Dicks was trying to emulate that, but he did, but not as well as some of the Hinchcliffe era story elements as well, because I do think they kind of lacked the inspiration, the real life inspiration that inspired some of the stories in that specific element. Like obviously in the pretty much every single story in season 13 was based in some form of horror movie or horror gothic sci-fi movie or something like that. But in this, I think horror Fang Rock, if there was a slight inspiration to it, do you think it would have been somewhat better? I like the moments of the story, especially, but despite the cliffhangers for parts 1 and 2 being very weak and ineffective, but I think the part 3 cliffhanger was really good, especially when the Doctor realized that he made this mistake of locking everyone in the lighthouse with the dangerous routine inside, when he and Leela saw Ruben's dead body. I also like the bit where Leela pretty much slapped Adelaide when the Doctor informed everyone that Pomodoro had actually died, and I really like that set because she was really annoying the hell out of me, and I think why I don't really think the story as much as a classic as it's made out to is because of this woman alone for some odd reason, which I'll get to later. So I think on to the acting of the story, actually think it was decent. Tom Baker did a very good job, even though he wasn't entirely thrilled with the direction that Doctor Who was going, especially after Philip Hinchcliffe had to leave. And obviously, he wasn't too thrilled at the fact that he had to have a companion with him, but he actually wanted to have the show going on have the show going with Tom Baker with no companion. But he wasn't in it, so it actually helped the story because obviously the Doctor wasn't his goofy and ejected stuff, and it was more on the broody side, pretty much like the Deadly Assassin. But obviously he had Leela with him. He was more forewarning and stuff like that. He was all gloomy and forewarning and stuff like that. But oddly enough, it did work. And obviously, there was one bit there was some goofy elements creeping in, especially when he pretty much just calmly told everyone that everyone in the lighthouse is going to end up dead in the morning, and they was all in terrible danger. And I thought that was actually very fun and a good use of Gallows' humor. And I liked how he was reciting the poem Flannan Isle to Lilo at the end of the story, and after she got her eyesight back. Louise Jameson did a great job as Lilo, and I do think this story is one of her best performances. I thought she was. I thought it was great how she was the one that dealt the killing blow to the Rutan in the lighthouse, and I love how she slapped Adelaide because I did find her quite annoying. But I did like how she was trying to comfort her afterwards, and when Adelaide told Leela about her astrologer, Leela, obviously being a savage, she thought that she was talking about a shaman. And I actually liked how she was how she was using the sledgehammer to try and break down those Rubens room before the doctor stopped her. And obviously, I think a few scenes before, she saw the sledgehammer and she was admiring it. I found that scene oddly comforting and endearing for some odd reason. I also did like the scene where Leela was threatening to cut out Palmerdo's heart if he didn't obey the doctor, and I actually found it funny when the doctor just pretty much played along with it. And obviously, the final moment I liked from Leela in the story was when the doctor blew up the Rutan ship, and obviously the doctor told Leela not to look, and Leela decided to have like a sneaky peek, and she ended up temporarily losing her eyesight, and then when she realized she was blind, she was asking the doctor to kill her because in the Sever team, that's pretty much the fate of the old and the crippled. But then the doctor pretty much just laughed it off and said that it will come. It's only temporary, and just blink a few times and you gain your eyesight back. In which they actually changed her eye color from blue to brown because I think Louise Jameson had an issue with the contact lenses she was given. So I think that was a pretty cool element to the friendship, even though despite the fact that the two didn't actually get along behind the scenes. The side cast, and bearing in mind they all died, of all the side characters, only three I actually liked. So the side characters we had Ruben. He was the one of the keepers in the Fang Rock lighthouse. The Rutan killed him and copied his body, and that's how he pretty much killed all the side cast. And I think that the actor did a good job playing the Rutan as well as Ruben as well. I think that was decent to say the least. Vince, he was the youngest of the three lightkeepers, and he was the first to see light in the sky, but he wasn't believed. And he was actually one of the three side characters I actually liked, and I think it was oddly adorable that he was telling Leela that he prefers to talk to the seals other than his fellow lighthouse keepers, and he was a good guy. And I was sad when he was killed by Ruben at the end of part 4. I do think he deserved to have at least lived to the end because he was pretty loyal to the Doctor and stuff like that. We also had Ben. He was another keeper in the lighthouse, and he was the first victim of the Rutan scouts. Lord Palmerdo, he was an aristocrat, and his steam yacht crashed into Fang Rock, where he, his assistant Adelaide, his friend Skinsdale, and his bosun Harker were the only survivors, and he was blackmailing Skinsdale for a secret that Skinsdale would have, and if it got out, it pretty much ruined Skinsdale's reputation. And then he tried to bribe Vince to fix any form of communication, and he pretty much died immediately afterwards. Adelaide, she was Lord Palmerdale's assistant, and I found her incredibly annoying because she kept on screaming at the slightest fright or even a corpse to the point where Lilo was actually wondering if she's actually seen a dead body before, which I actually found funny to be honest. Aside from that, I did think she had some bitchy tendencies. Even the doctor was, even though the doctor was a bit at fault in that, but I do think she was being a little bit bitchy, and I was quite happy that she was killed by the Rutan. We also had Skinsdale, a former soldier and a friend of Palmerdale, whom he was being blackmailed, and to try and keep his secret, he actually sabotaged the telegraph, the only main form of communication to the mainland, which the Doctor actually brought up. Despite that cock up, he was actually one of he's the second of the three side characters I actually liked. And I actually liked how he tried to aid the Doctor and Leela in trying to stop the Rutan, but obviously the Rutan pretty much killed him with its tentacles. And of course we had Harker. He is the bosun of Palmerdo's yacht. He was killed by Rutan Ruben, and I liked his character also because he wasn't as problematic as the other characters, and he was pretty much just there, to say the least. Enemy of the story, the Rutan host. The Rutans were losing their war against the Sontarans, so one of the Rutans retreated to 1902, which is where the story is set, for an attempt to scout planets for potential base to continue their war, and the Rutan who used Ruben's form to try and kill off the people in the lighthouse, and at the same time examining the use of planet Earth. But it was killed by the Doctor and Leela, and the Rutan fleet was destroyed. I think the Rutan was a great villain. I liked how scary and mysterious it was, more so than in the Sontarans, and I actually do wish we got to see more of the Rutans as well. And I think having the Rutans show up at the end of this, like towards the end of the story, was a good decision because it pretty much kept the tension in the story a little bit, even though it's not as tense as other stories. But I think the tension was good enough for this story to actually be passable. But I did think the victory, how the Doctor and Leela were able to defeat the Rutan, was a bit too simple for my taste. So on to the fault of the story. As good as it was for having all the side characters die, but I do think it's a bit problematic for me because I think maybe one or two side characters should have at least survived, and then maybe let's say maybe having Skinsdale or Vince survive, and maybe or maybe having Skinsdale die towards the end, and maybe having Vince being the final guy, and then like the Doctor pretty much repairs like all the communication, and he's able to sail back home or something like that. And I do think, or better still, maybe Vince could have been a companion himself, or even though he didn't really have much to do in the story. But then again, Jamie, he in his debut story, he didn't really do much, and yet he's one of the show's most beloved companions. And I do think the story did try a bit too hard to try and emulate the Hinchcliffe era stories. It worked, but at the same time, it lacked as I said before, it lacked the inspiration, like the real life inspiration that those stories had in comparison to this one. The pacing was alright, on the other hand, but it did feel dull in some places, especially part 1. So to conclude this review, I think the horror of Fang Rock evades a shaky start to the 15th season, but obviously the absence of Philip Hinchcliffe was heavily felt, and if this story was a part of the earlier Tom Baker seasons, it would have probably been one a lot better to say the least. So I give Horror of Fang Rock an 8 out of 10. My next review will be The Invisible Enemy, which sees the debut of new companion Robot Dog K9, who was actually one of my favorite companions. So thank you for watching. Please let me know what you thought of Horror Fang Rock and this review itself. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to join my Discord server, link is in the description. Until then, see you later.